I am 63 years old. I wear the same 3 shirts every week. I drive a 10-year-old car that makes a little noise when I turn left. I eat simple food. I wake up early. I go to bed tired. And most days, I sit on my porch with a cup of tea and watch the world move without me. People look at me, and they see an old man, a quiet man, a man who has nothing important to say and nothing important to show. And I let them think that, because I learned something a long time ago, something my father told me when I was just a boy sitting at his feet in our small village home. He said, "Son, a man who needs to tell you he is great is probably not." I never forgot those words. So when my son-in-law Marcus looked at me across that dinner table, his expensive suit, his gold watch, his parents sitting beside him like judges at a court, and he slid that envelope across the white tablecloth toward me, I picked it up, I opened it slowly, I read it, and then I looked up at him and I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because after everything, after every comment, every dismissal, every whispered insult, that moment was the one I had been waiting for. And it had finally arrived. Let me go back to the beginning, because to understand what happened that night, you need to understand who I am. My name is Harold Boateng. I was born the 4th child of 7, in a small house where the roof leaked when it rained, and we put buckets on the floor and called it music. My mother worked as a seamstress. My father was a carpenter. We were not poor in spirit, but we were poor in money, and I learned very early that the world does not hold your hand when you are struggling. I left school at 17 to help my father. I worked with my hands. I carried things. I fixed things. I built things, and when I was 22, I started a small supply business out of the back of a borrowed truck. Just me, a notebook, and a phone that barely worked. I delivered building materials, cement, timber, roofing sheets, pipes, unglamorous work, dirty work, work that leaves calluses on your palms and dust in your lungs. But I worked, and I worked, and I worked. By the time I was 35, I had 6 employees. By 40, I had 40. By 50, I had built Boateng Construction Supply into one of the largest material distribution companies in the region. We supplied to government contracts, private developers, housing estates. We had warehouses, a fleet of trucks, an office building with my name on the lease. But you would never know it by looking at me. I still drove my old car. I still wore my simple shirts. I still ate at roadside stalls when I traveled. I paid my workers well. I gave to charity quietly. I went home every evening to my wife, Dorothy, and we sat on the porch and drank tea and talked about small things. The neighbor's new dog, the price of tomatoes, whether it would rain on Saturday. We lived simply, not because we had to, because we chose to. Dorothy always said, "Harold, the happiest people I've ever met were not the richest. They were the ones who knew they had enough." She was the wisest woman I ever knew. She passed away 4 years ago, and every day since, I have carried a piece of her with me like a stone in my pocket, heavy but warm. We had one daughter, our only child. Her name is Grace, and Grace, she was everything to us. Grace grew up knowing we had money, but she never grew up acting like it. Dorothy and I made sure of that. She went to good schools, yes, but she also washed her own clothes, cooked her own food, and was not allowed to look down on anyone, not the cleaner, not the gateman, not the man selling oranges on the street corner. She became a teacher, not a corporate lawyer or a banker, a primary school teacher, and I was prouder of her for that than I would have been for anything else. She met Marcus 3 years ago, Marcus Adami. He was tall, sharp, dressed, confident in the way that young men who have never truly suffered are confident. He came from money. His father owned a chain of hotels. His mother was a socialite whose face appeared in lifestyle magazines. They were the kind of family that announced their wealth before they entered a room. When Grace first brought him home, I shook his hand and offered him tea. He looked around our home, our modest home, with its simple furniture and family photos on the walls, and I saw something flicker across his face. Just for a second, a small calculation, but I said nothing. Grace loved him, and so I loved him too because she did. They got married 18 months ago, a beautiful wedding. I paid for everything, of course, quietly, through a separate account Marcus never knew about. Grace knew. She looked at me across the room that day with tears in her eyes and mouthed the words, "Thank you, Daddy. That was enough for me." After the wedding, Marcus and Grace moved into a nice apartment. Marcus worked in real estate, buying and selling property, dealing with developers, arranging financing. He did well for himself, and he was proud of it. Too proud, I would come to understand. Part 4. The small cuts begin the first time Marcus said something that stung. We were at Grace's birthday dinner, just the three of us, at a restaurant he had chosen. He ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's weekly salary. He spoke to the waiter by clicking his fingers, and when the conversation turned to my life, he leaned back in his chair and said, with a smile that was not entirely kind, "Papa Harold, you should let me find you a better car, something befitting a man your age. That old thing you drive, people might think you need help." He laughed. Grace looked uncomfortable. I smiled. "I'm fine, Marcus," I said. "The car takes me where I need to go." He shrugged. "If you say so." But I noticed the look he exchanged with the waiter. A small smile, a shared joke at my expense. I said nothing, because I have lived long enough to know a man who needs to put others down to feel tall is not really tall at all. He is just standing on a chair and hoping no one notices. The months passed, and the comments continued, small, sharp things wrapped in laughter, so you couldn't quite call them cruel. When I came to visit Grace and he opened the door, he would sometimes look at my car in the parking lot and shake his head slowly, the way you'd shake your head at a child who hadn't learned to tie their shoes yet. When I sat at their dining table, he spoke to his friends on the phone about deals, big numbers, big names, and he made sure I could hear. Then he would look at me and add, "Sorry, Papa Harold, business talk. You wouldn't know this world." When Grace mentioned that I ran a business, Marcus would nod politely and say, "Yes, yes, small enterprise. Good for him. Small enterprise." Those two words, I heard them more times than I could count, and every time I swallowed them down with my tea, and I smiled and I nodded. Because Grace was happy, and her happiness was worth more than my pride. But there was one afternoon, and this is the part I think about often, when I stopped by their apartment without calling ahead. I had brought some food from a place Grace loved as a child, packed in containers, still warm. I knocked on the door. I heard Marcus's voice inside, talking on the phone. And before he opened the door, I heard him say to whoever was on the line, "No, it's probably just my father-in-law, the old man. He's harmless, just a bit simple. Doesn't really understand how the world works anymore." Then the door opened and his face changed immediately into a smile. "Papa Harold, what a surprise. Come in, come in." I came in. I put the food down. I stayed for 20 minutes, and when I drove home that afternoon, I sat in my car in my own driveway for a long time before going inside. Simple, harmless, doesn't understand how the world works. I was not angry, I was sad. Not for myself, I have made peace with being underestimated. It has served me well more times than I can count. I was sad because my daughter had married a man who saw people only by what they appeared to be worth. And I knew, the way old people know things, that this kind of blindness always, eventually, costs something. I just didn't know yet what it would cost. It was a Thursday evening when Marcus called me. This was unusual. He never called me directly. He would call Grace, and Grace would relay messages to me. So when my phone rang and I saw his name, I felt something shift in my chest. "Papa Harold," he said. His voice was warm, almost too warm. the warmth of a man who wants something. I wanted to personally invite you to dinner this Saturday. My parents are in town, Father and Mother Ademi. They have been wanting to meet you properly for a long time. We thought it would be a beautiful thing, bringing both families together. I was quiet for a moment. That sounds lovely, Marcus, I said. I'll be there. Wonderful. Oh, and Papa Harold, it's at Lumiere. You know it, the restaurant on Victoria Island. Smart casual, if you don't mind. Lumiere. I knew it. It was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. A place where a single table cost more than most people's rent. A place where people went not just to eat, but to be seen eating. Smart casual, he said. I heard what he didn't say. Please don't embarrass us. I hung up the phone, I sat in my chair, and slowly a thought formed in my mind, quiet and clear like water settling after a storm. I would go to that dinner. I would dress simply. I would say little, and I would watch. Because I had spent 63 years learning that if you are patient and quiet, the world will eventually show you exactly who it is. Saturday was 3 days away. I had time to prepare. I arrived at Lumiere at exactly 7 o'clock in my simple dark trousers and a clean but modest button-up shirt. I had not bought anything new. I had not worn a tie. I parked my old car in the valet area, and I watched the young valet look at it, then look at me, and I smiled at him and tipped him generously before he even moved the car. He looked surprised. I walked inside. The restaurant was everything you would expect. Soft golden lights. White tablecloths so crisp they looked ironed individually. Waiters moving like water, silent and precise. The low hum of wealthy conversation and the quiet clink of crystal glasses. Marcus was already there. He was standing near the entrance with Grace, and beside them were his parents. His father, Chief Emmanuel Ademi, was a large man, physically large, but also large in the way he occupied space. He wore a suit that had clearly been tailored specially for him. His cufflinks caught the light. He had the handshake of a man who had practiced it to communicate power. His mother, Mrs. Beatrice Ademi, was slim and dressed immaculately. Her jewelry was understated but clearly expensive, the kind of expensive that doesn't shout but hums. She held her handbag with both hands in front of her, the way royalty hold things. They looked at me as I approached. I saw it happen, that same flicker, that same small calculation behind polite smiles. Papa Harold, Marcus said, with the big, wide smile of a television presenter. You made it. Come, come. Papa, Mama, this is Dorothy's father. Grace's father, I mean. Papa Harold. He caught himself, calling me Dorothy's father, as though I were defined only by the woman I had lost. I noticed it. I said nothing. Chief Ademi extended his hand. Harold, good to finally meet the man behind our Grace. The pleasure is mine, Chief, I said. Mrs. Ademi smiled at me, a smile that was perfectly shaped. We've heard so much about you, she said. Marcus tells us you're in materials supply, is it? Something like that. I said. We sat down. The dinner began pleasantly enough. We ordered. The food was excellent. I will give Lumiere that. But I was not really there for the food. I was there to watch, and what I watched was this. Chief Ademi spoke mostly to Marcus. They discussed property values, investment portfolios, a new hotel development on the coast. They spoke in the coded language of wealthy men who want you to know they are wealthy without appearing to try. Mrs. Ademi spoke to Grace mostly about the apartment, about plans for children, about whether Grace had thought about leaving teaching for something with more growth potential. And me. They were polite to me, politely indifferent, the way you might be polite to the waiter, acknowledging my presence just enough to appear decent, but not truly including me in anything. At one point, Chief Ademi turned to me with the look of a man performing generosity. So, Harold, what do you do to keep yourself busy in your retirement? Retirement. He assumed I was retired. Oh, I still work a little, I said pleasantly. Keep myself occupied. Good, good. Important to stay active at your age. Marcus tells me you have a small distribution business. Started from scratch, he says. Admirable. Admirable. The word a powerful man uses to compliment someone he considers beneath him. Thank you, I said, and I took a sip of my water. Marcus was watching me. I could feel it. He was watching to see if I would say more, reveal more, try to compete. And I gave him nothing. I just smiled and ate my food and listened. And then, like a cloud moving across the sun, the mood at the table shifted. It was small at first, a comment about Grace's teaching salary. Mrs. Adami made a delicate face when the number was mentioned. Of course, with the right support from family, these gaps can be managed, she said, and she looked at Marcus, not at me, as if I were not capable of providing that support, as if I were not sitting right there. Then Chief Adami said something that drew a small, quiet laugh from Marcus. You know, Harold, we want to make sure our son's family is properly taken care of. It takes a certain foundation to maintain the lifestyle Marcus is accustomed to. We don't say that to offend, just being realistic. I nodded slowly. I understand, I said. It's just Marcus has been working very hard, and with property prices where they are, a young couple needs strong backing. We provide that, of course, for our son's side. We just want to be sure that, how shall I put it, that the balance is there, on both sides of the family. He smiled. Mrs. Adami smiled. Marcus smiled. And Grace, my Grace, looked down at her plate. That look on her face. That was the moment something hardened inside me. Not anger, not revenge, just a quiet, firm decision. Enough, the main course was cleared away. Dessert menus were brought. And then Marcus sat forward slightly and cleared his throat in the way men do when they are about to say something they've prepared. Papa Harold, he said, there's actually a reason we wanted this meeting, a specific reason. I looked at him. The truth is, Grace and I have been looking at a property, a beautiful home on the island for our growing family, but the financing needs, it's a significant amount, and my parents have very generously offered to contribute their share. Chief Adami nodded. Mrs. Adami smiled that sculpted smile. And so, Marcus continued, we thought it would be appropriate to have a conversation, as two families, about how we might together support Grace and Marcus going forward. He paused. Then he reached into the jacket pocket inside his suit. He pulled out an envelope, white, sealed, thick. He slid it across the table toward me, slowly, deliberately, like a card player laying down what he thinks is his winning hand. I looked at the envelope. I looked at him. That's a contribution document, he said. A formal outline of what each family might be expected to bring to the table. My parents have already signed their side. We thought, given your means, given what you're able to manage, we kept the expectation modest for your comfort. For your comfort. I picked up the envelope. The table was quiet. I could feel everyone watching me. Chief Adami with his knowing expression, Mrs. Adami with her polite smile, Marcus with his held breath, and Grace still looking at her plate, her hands in her lap. I opened the envelope. Inside was a neatly typed document. I read it. I read every word. The Adami family had pledged a significant sum, very significant. And at the bottom of the document, there was a line for the contribution expected from the Boateng family representative. The amount they had written in for me was less than what I pay some of my junior warehouse staff. They had assessed me. They had looked at my old car and my simple shirt and my quiet manner, and they had decided exactly what I was worth to them. I read it twice. Then I set the document down on the table. And I looked up. Here is where I need to stop, because before I tell you what happened next, I need to tell you something I haven't told you yet. Something that Marcus did not know. Something that Chief Adami, with all his research and all his money and all his connections, had somehow never discovered. 3 months before that dinner, 3 months Marcus's real estate firm had submitted a major development proposal to a government-linked construction body. A large residential project, thousands of units, the kind of project that could make a career. The proposal required a primary materials supplier, a company with the capacity, the track record, the government certifications, and the logistics network to supply an entire development at scale. There were 5 companies on the shortlist. Boateng Construction Supply was one of them. In fact, and Marcus had no way of knowing this, Boateng Construction Supply was the leading shortlisted candidate. We had the best pricing, the best track record, the strongest government relationship. The decision was almost certain to go our way. What Marcus also did not know, because I had never told Grace, because it was not yet public, was that 2 weeks before that dinner, I had received a visit from the lead developer of that project, a man named Mr. Adekoker. He came to my office, my actual office, the one with my name on the building. He sat across from me and he said, "Mr. Boateng, we would like to formalize the partnership. We would like Boateng Construction Supply as our exclusive supplier for the full development. But there's a second conversation I want to have with you. We are also looking for an equity partner, someone who understands materials, logistics, and long-term infrastructure. We want to offer you a stake in the development company." The stake they offered me was worth more than all of Chief Emmanuel Ademi's hotels combined. I had not signed yet. I was still reviewing the documents with my lawyers, but I knew. And I knew something else, something that made that dinner table, that envelope, that smiling face of Marcus suddenly take on a very different shape. The real estate firm that had submitted the development proposal, it was Marcus's firm. Marcus, my son-in-law, who called me simple, who slid an envelope across the table assigning my worth. Marcus had been hoping and praying for 6 months that his firm would win this project. And without knowing it, he had been praying to the man sitting across from him in the modest shirt. I looked at Marcus, I looked at Chief Ademi, I looked at Mrs. Ademi, I looked at my daughter Grace, who still had not raised her eyes. Then I did something no one at that table expected. I laughed, not a cruel laugh, not a performance. Just a real, genuine laugh, the kind that comes from deep inside when you finally understand the full shape of something that has been forming for a long time. Everyone looked at me. "Papa Harold," Marcus said. His smile was uncertain now. "I'm sorry," I said, wiping my eye. "Forgive an old man." I folded the document and placed it back in the envelope. Then I placed the envelope in my shirt pocket. "Marcus," I said. My voice was calm, very calm. "How is the Emerald Gardens project going? The residential development proposal your firm submitted? Any news?" The color that left his face in that moment. He stared at me. "How do you know about that?" "I know about it," I said simply, "because Boateng Construction Supply is on the short list to supply it." Silence, real silence, the kind that has weight. Boateng. Chief Ademi started, and I watched his expression change as something began moving behind his eyes. Something connecting, something searching his memory. Boateng Construction Supply. "Yes," I said. I reached into my other pocket and placed my business card on the table. Harold Boateng, founder and executive chairman, Mrs. Ademi picked up the card. She read it. She put it down. She looked at her husband. Chief Ademi looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at me. And Grace, my Grace, finally raised her eyes. And in them was a look I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Not triumph, not "I told you so," just pain, deep, quiet pain, the pain of a daughter who had watched her father be dismissed and minimized and reduced for months, and had not done enough to stop it. I did not shout. I did not stand up dramatically. I did not perform anything. I simply spoke the truth, quietly, the way my father taught me. Chief Ademi, I said, I want to thank you for tonight, truly, because this dinner has shown me something I needed to see. He was very still. You assessed me, I continued. You looked at my car, you looked at my shirt. You listened to Marcus describe me as a man with a small business and modest means, and you made your decision about who I was. Harold, he started. Please, I said gently, let me finish. He closed his mouth. I don't blame you for that. We all make judgments. It is human. But the judgment you made tonight, the number in that envelope, that was not just a financial calculation. That was a statement about my worth as a father, as a man, as a member of this family. Marcus was very pale now. Marcus, I said, turning to him. You called me simple, harmless. You said I don't understand how the world works. You said that to someone on the phone one afternoon, and you didn't know I was on the other side of your door. I never said anything, because I wanted to believe you were a good man who just had some growing to do. Grace made a sound. Small, like air escaping. I'm not here to destroy anything tonight. I am not angry, but I am going to tell you some things that are true, and I need you to hear them clearly. I reached into my jacket now, the inside pocket, and placed a folded set of papers on the table. Not dramatically, just simply. Those are preliminary documents from the Emerald Gardens project. My company has been selected as the preferred supplier. The formal contract will be signed next week. The project is worth. I named the figure. Chief Ademi closed his eyes briefly. Additionally, I said, I have been offered an equity stake in the development holding company. I have not decided yet whether to accept, but the offer is there. I paused. Boateng Construction Supply employs 412 people. We operate 7 warehouses. We have supplied to 37 major government infrastructure projects in the last 12 years. Last year, our revenue was, I named that figure too. The table was so quiet, I could hear the soft jazz playing at the far end of the restaurant. I live simply, I said, because my wife Dorothy taught me that a man who confuses wealth with worth is a man who will never truly be rich. I drive my old car because it works. I wear simple shirts because I am comfortable, and I never told my son-in-law what I owned because I wanted to know, I needed to know, what kind of man he was before he knew what I was worth. I looked at Marcus directly. Now I know. Part 12. Grace speaks. It was Grace who broke the silence that followed. She had been so quiet all evening, so still, and when she finally spoke, her voice was not loud, but it carried like a bell in a quiet room. Marcus, just his name, but the way she said it. He turned to her. My father paid for our wedding, she said. You didn't know that. I asked him not to tell you because I knew you would see it differently if you knew where it came from. I was wrong to hide it, but I hid it because I was ashamed. Not of my father, of what I knew you would do with the information. Marcus said nothing. Every school holiday when I was a child. Grace continued, my father drove us to visit his workers, not to check on them, to see them. He knew their children's names. He knew when someone was sick. He paid for 2 of his driver's children to go to university. He built a borehole for a community near one of his warehouses. He never told anyone. He never put his name on it. Her voice was shaking now, but she kept going. You looked at him and you saw an old man with an old car and a simple shirt. And you never once thought to ask, never once thought to wonder who he might be beneath all of that. You decided, and then you treated him accordingly. And I sat here tonight, and I watched it happen. I watched your father talk down to mine. I watched you slide that envelope across the table, and I said nothing. She finally looked at me. I'm sorry, Daddy, she said. I'm so sorry. And that was the moment that broke me. Not the envelope, not the insults, not the months of small dismissals, but my daughter's eyes filled with tears asking forgiveness. You have nothing to be sorry for, my love, I said, and I meant it. Chief Emmanuel Ademi was a proud man. But he was also a businessman, and businessmen understand Better than almost anyone, that pride is a luxury you cannot afford when the stakes are real. He sat back in his chair, he looked at his wife, and then he did something I did not expect. He sighed a long, honest exhale, and he said, "Mr. Boateng, Harold, I owe you an apology." His wife nodded. "We both do," she said. "I made assumptions," Chief Ademi continued. "And they were wrong. Not just factually, they were wrong in the way a man judges another man. We came into this evening with a picture already formed, and that was disrespectful. I am sorry." He was quiet for a moment. "I have spent 40 years building wealth, and somewhere along the way, I made the mistake of equating what a man shows with what a man is. My father would have been ashamed of me tonight." I looked at him carefully. I am a decent judge of people, after 63 years, and what I saw in his face was not performance. It was genuine. "I accept your apology, Chief," I said. Then I looked at Marcus. Marcus was different. Younger, harder to crack. His jaw was tight, and his eyes were moving, calculating, even now, trying to find the angle, the recovery. "Marcus," I said quietly. He looked at me. "I am not your enemy. I have never been your enemy. I have only ever wanted one thing from you, to treat my daughter the way she deserves to be treated, and to treat the people in her life with basic respect." His jaw loosened slightly. "You are a smart young man, ambitious, driven. Those are good things, but ambition without humility is like a car with no brakes. It moves fast, and it will eventually crash into something it cannot survive." He swallowed. "I have not decided about the equity stake in Emerald Gardens, but I will tell you this. Whatever I decide about business has nothing to do with what you did tonight. Business and family are separate rooms, but both rooms need honest foundations." I stood up. I reached for my jacket. "Thank you all for dinner," I said. It was illuminating, and I walked out of Lumiere, past the white tablecloths, and the crystal glasses, and the soft golden lights, out into the night air, where my old car was waiting. 3 things happened in the weeks following that dinner. The first, I signed the supply contract for Emerald Gardens. I also accepted the equity stake, after consultation with my lawyers and my team. It was the largest single business decision I had made in a decade. My staff celebrated in the warehouse with food and music and speeches that made me cry twice. The second, Marcus came to my home alone one Sunday morning. He knocked on the door. He was wearing ordinary clothes, jeans, a simple shirt. He looked younger somehow, smaller in a way that had nothing to do with size. He sat on my porch. I made tea, and for a long time neither of us said anything. Then he said, "I've been thinking about what you said about ambition without humility. Yes, I think I've been scared," he said. "For a long time, not of poverty, my family never had that struggle, but scared of being invisible, of not mattering, and I think somewhere I started to measure other people against that fear. They seemed to not matter by the way they looked, the car they drove. I think I used it to make myself feel more." He looked at his hands. "It's not an excuse," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. Not just with you, the way I talked about you, the things I said. It was wrong, and I'm ashamed." I sat with that for a moment. "Marcus," I said, "I've been watching you since you came into my daughter's life, and I have seen the parts of you that are real. The way you look at Grace when she doesn't know you're looking. The way you called me yourself to invite me to that dinner because you wanted it to go well. Those parts are real too." He looked up. "Growing up is a long process," I said. "Some of us take longer than others. The important thing is that you keep growing." I handed him his tea. "Now, tell me about this Emerald Gardens project. My team is going to need a good project coordinator on your firm's side. Someone who understands both the real estate side and the supply chain." He blinked, then slowly, carefully, he smiled. A real smile, not the television one, the real one. "I'd like that," he said. "The third thing that happened is the one I think about most. My daughter Grace came to me 2 weeks after the dinner. She came alone, no Marcus. She sat across from me in the living room, in the same chair her mother used to sit in. She looked at the photos on the wall, the ones of her as a child, the ones of me and Dorothy when we were young, the ones of my early warehouse, barely 3 walls and a corrugated roof. "Daddy," she said, "why didn't you ever tell Marcus what you'd built? Why didn't you ever correct him when he dismissed you?" I thought about this for a long time before answering. "Because, my love," I finally said, "I didn't need him to know. A man's value is not confirmed by another man's recognition. I knew what I had built. Your mother knew. My workers knew. God knew. That was enough." "But he was disrespecting you." "Yes, and one day that disrespect was going to return to him, as it always does. I didn't need to stop it. I just needed to wait for life to show him what he needed to see." Grace was quiet. "Your grandfather used to say," I continued, "that the tree which survives the storm is not the one that fights the wind. It's the one with the deepest roots." She came and sat beside me then. She put her head on my shoulder, the way she used to do when she was 7 years old and afraid of thunder. "I want Marcus to be that kind of man," she said. "A man with roots. He is learning." I said, "Give him time." We sat there for a while. The evening came in through the window. Somewhere outside a bird was singing. "Daddy, yes. Did Mama ever see you get disrespected like that and just sit quietly?" I smiled. "Many times, and every time she would squeeze my hand under the table. And afterward she would say, 'Harold, patience is not weakness. Patience is how the farmer grows his crop. The harvest always comes.'" Grace laughed softly. "That sounds like Mama." "It does," I said. We sat in the quiet for a long time. And it was enough. If you have stayed with me this long through this whole story, then let me leave you with this. The world will constantly try to tell you what you are worth based on what you appear to be. Your car, your clothes, your address, your job title, the restaurant you can afford to eat in. The people who will underestimate you will sometimes be strangers. And sometimes, and this is the harder truth, they will be the people sitting at your dinner table. And you will want to stand up. You will want to announce yourself, correct them, show them the receipts, the documents, the evidence that you are more than they think. Don't, not out of cowardice, but out of something much stronger, out of the understanding that your worth does not need their confirmation. Live your life with deep roots. Do your work with integrity. Treat every human being, from the parking valet to the chief with the tailored suit, with the same basic dignity. Not because it will always be returned, but because that is who you choose to be. Because in the end, the envelope they slide across the table does not define you. It defines them, and the harvest, as my Dorothy always said, always comes. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone, a parent, a grandparent, someone who was quietly great and quietly overlooked, please give this video a like. It lets me know you were here. And if you believe that real worth is not worn on the outside, but lived from the inside, then subscribe. Because there are more stories where this one came from. True stories, human stories, stories that remind us who we really are. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of each other. And never mistake silence for weakness sometimes. Silence is the most powerful thing in the room.